We should be live in just a second. Good morning, everybody. This is Steve Sapadowski, publisher of BuyUBuzz.com. And this morning, we're doing something really special. We're going to direct this only to Twitter and likewise to YouTube. And I'm here with retired Colonel Rob Maness, and we're going to be talking national politics, North Korea, which is hot in the news, the economy, jobs, Donald Trump, and we'd like to get your feedback. We'll also post some tweets about some of the issues that we'll be following and talking about. So, good morning, Colonel Maness. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Steve. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you. Thank you. This should be really exciting. I haven't done a show specifically directed towards Twitter and YouTube only. Normally I've included Facebook, but be really interesting. So how about telling us, first of all, let me just give a background. You're a retired Air Force colonel, and you have run for U.S. Senate and run for a statewide office. Basically tell us about your website and tell us about that first.
Well, after my first run for the U.S. Senate, we created a new company called Iron Liberty News and Iron Liberty Group, LLC, which owns and operates Iron Liberty News. And our websites for our news is where we fight the fake news with the truth on both sides of the aisle. We continue to build on that audience and using my political campaign audiences and those types of data. We have been able to build this effort so that we're continuing to grow that part of the business. I do make periodic appearances on shows, both video, live TV, and radio. And Iron Liberty News is in the process of pitching its own show, a video show that's going to be on a pay channel. We're not at liberty to talk about exactly which one yet, but we are in the process of doing that. And we get the opportunity to talk with you every Friday morning at 8 o'clock. And that just keeps us involved and keeps the people's voice out there. That's why I became popular in the state of Louisiana in 2014 and continue to enjoy success with my supporters is because they believe that they need a voice outside of elected office and outside of the bureaucracies and outside of the mainstream media. I try to be that voice, but I also want to put my own voice out there because I served my country for over 32 years, and we want to make sure that that country is around and it looks like the one that I served for my grandchildren. And that's what our efforts are all about here.
Interesting. So when we hear, see, and read, "Make America Great Again," and I know that you promote that, the MAGA. I've made it known that I don't agree with Donald Trump personally at all. I'm more patient with his policies. But since you brought it up, let me ask you this. What about making America great? How can we make America great from your standpoint?
Well, I think what you're seeing happening just last night with the South Korean National Security Advisor making the announcement from the White House, actually, about the president and the leader of North Korea agreeing to meet to have discussions, and that the North Koreans have asked, at least from the reporting that I've seen and from what came out of the White House last night, that the president meet with them, that the North has decided that they want to get out of the nuclear business, it sounds like. Now, having said that, they've done this before, but they've never dealt with an administration led by a person like Mr. Trump, at least not since Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was the last American leader to take on a major nuclear power leader one-on-one with Mr. Gorbachev. Now, is it the same level of that? No, it's not. But we live in a different world today than we did in the days of the heavy Cold War, as I like to call it. However, it is very important, and it's Mr. Trump's national security strategy, his maximum pressure strategy across the spectrum, not just with military ideas, military forces, and military strategies, but also economic and informational, and those all working together that has gotten us to this point. That is one way that I think the term "Make America Great Again" applies to the vast numbers of people that voted for Mr. Trump from across the political spectrum. And I think that's what really troubles a lot of folks in the elite media. I call them the East and West Coast elites in the media business, mostly out of New York and Washington, and some in California. But they're very troubled by Mr. Trump. I think one talking head on CNN last night was quoted as saying, "Well, he'll be a great president if he pulls this off," talking about the North Korea discussion. But we're very far from actually getting anything done. But we're now in a position to get things done where we weren't when Mr. Trump took office, and he immediately started implementing some of the things that me and folks like me that have been in the national security business and in the nuclear business specifically, and the strategy business, he immediately started implementing those kinds of things in spite of all of the was going on and the palace intrigue and those kind of things, and this is the result to that. The result. Now we have to maintain our skepticism, and he's got to keep up the pressure, and his administration's got to keep up the pressure, and I think he has said he's going to do that. That's one way. The other way is the jobs report that we saw this morning. It's above expectations, especially since I think you mentioned it earlier that January was below expectations, and the jobs report came out. It's over 313,000 jobs created.
That's really
in February,
amazing,
and that's really good news.
So let me interrupt just for a second. I want to talk about North Korea just for a second and jobs. Sure. What I have heard in terms of some people feel that, yeah, it's really great that North Korea is at this point. That we've been there before with North Korea. And the argument is that really, why give up this meeting with the president so early? If North Korea is not going to commit now to do away with their nuclear program, because obviously, what else does he have? What else does the president have? So that's what the argument is, I think, that I've heard on the other side. One other argument, by the way, is that that many Democrats and Republicans have argued for really pushing on the button of the sanctions, the sanctions that you're talking about, and that probably is what, and that they're saying that the president heard that and followed that. Now, I'm not going to go with that. I mean, I have no idea. I think he was all in favor of sanctions, and I disagree with some of the words that he used. But the major issue, I think, is what about, does he have anything else that he can use as leverage? This could really blow up against him, meaning against the president.
Well, first of all, I think that that we're not going to have any more damage than what's already been done over the last 25 years from the three previous presidents since really this issue started. That's even if he has nothing more, we've already gone beyond where we were able to get. However, there's still leverage in the box, and it's not just economic sanctions. I mean, when you park two U.S. Navy carrier battle groups when you regularly demonstrate that both nuclear and non-nuclear bombers, and these are bombers and combat aircraft that can get to your most precious targets that you keep deeply buried in solid granite rock mountains. When you're surrounded by that, when you have China finally coming on board, although not as completely, I think, as any Westerners would like, but finally coming on board on the sanction side and on the discussion side, I think that you've taken the right steps in the right direction, and there is much more leverage there to use. The main piece of it is we're not going to stop until we see what the North Koreans actually are going to do. And if they do the right things, then we can start bringing them back into the community of nations instead of being the isolated government that they are and the completely impoverished and starving population that they are, sadly.
Oh, okay, that's fair. That's fair enough. But we had we have a military option anyway right now. I mean, so I mean, what can we do actually if they don't just stop their nuclear program? What can we do other than take that military action or continue the same, say, economic sanctions that we're using against them?
Right, but these are sanctions that have cut their funding flow off. You can't create any and test any more nuclear weapons and missiles unless you have the funding. We have successfully been able to stifle that flow of resources. We have successfully been able to intercept the I call it ghost ship network that Iran uses, that the North Koreans use, that the Chinese use, that are all being stopped at sea. We have successfully shown that we are focused on that area of the world from a military perspective,
So
not just in
yeah,
words but in deeds. I
sure.
mean, we haven't put as much actionable pressure on the North Koreans and the South Koreans really as part of our allies. They're under some pressure too because of what we're doing, and we know that. We haven't done that in 25 years. Now that they know that they're dealing with an America that is not going to back down and is not going to let up, that's a totally different ball game than what they've faced for 25 years and over two regimes in the North Korean side.
Okay. Um, so let's change subjects, and I appreciate what you're saying. I really do. Uh, the only point I'm making is maybe we should just continue that and
Absolutely.
not meet with him right now. That's only
Well, we'll
that's
see.
yeah.
We'll see. He said that he would not do any testing in this time period leading up to the meetings. I think that this president, I'm not surprised that he's meeting with him, even though I'm sure the experts on the national security side were saying, no, Mr. President, you're giving them what they want. You're elevating them to something that's been their goal all along. And that may be somewhat true that they're achieving a goal. But it's a goal that doesn't surprise me. This president likes to look people in the eye. He likes to talk to people. And I think Mr. Kim Jong-un will come away with it after looking this man in the eye and realize that he's not going to get anywhere continuing the behavior that he's seeing if the meeting actually happens. Like I said, they said they would do certain things during this time period. And if they
Right.
don't, it'll be interesting to see how the reaction goes.
Okay, so let's see. We're going to talk about the jobs report, and you mentioned 313,000. So, how does that? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think I mean, corporations and big business is got a much more positive outlook now. They are able to take financial decisions and capital outlay positions and decisions and start creating these jobs that we're seeing on this side instead of withholding capital. And you see it in the tax reform bill. We hadn't brought that up. The tax reform bill actually is probably having some effect in a positive way on the jobs numbers. A lot of folks are upset with Mr. Trump's tariff position on steel. But you know what? When you look at the visual yesterday from him signing that package and the hardworking men and women that were surrounding him, those weren't company executives. Those were the working people of the United States of America that generally vote Democrat and have as a trend for decades now that are solidly behind this president. And I'm not saying he's doing that from a purely political perspective, but part of it is politics. And he just sealed control of Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, all those what are known as the Rust Belt states in that deal. And on top of that, he has put the United States in a negotiating position where it is in the position of strength with not only folks that are our enemies, so to speak. I use that word not in a military way, but from an economic perspective, who are not only on the other side of the trade issue, but that are on our side, like our allies. It's put us in a really strong negotiating position to where I think it's going to have a much more positive effect than negative. And I know the naysayers are out there, but if it's done right, the way I'm hearing that he's going to do it, I think the positives will much further outweigh the negatives and the potential loss of jobs due to the things outside of the steel industry that are being talked about on both sides of the aisle, because it's really shaken the Republican and the Democrat establishment.
Sure, sure. I just put up a tweet. It's up there right now. Basically, this is from Vice President Mike Pence. Great news, 313,000 new jobs created in February and nearly 3 million jobs added since POTUS was elected. A year of action, a year of results. So getting back to the point that you're making, Michigan, they also make cars, and those car prices are going to go up. And they're not going to be able to export as many cars because of the sanctions that, say, Europe are going to put on us. So I don't know. Are there enough steel makers to make a difference if you compare it to the trickle down, the car makers, the retailers, etc., that may be negatively impacted by a counter tariff?
Well, there's no doubt that there are going to be some changes in pricing. There are going to be some changes in availability, but the changes on the U.S. side, definitely in the short term, and if it's done right in the long term, will be increased jobs. Will be American products are competitive with international products. Other countries taking the initiative when, like Mexico did last night, by holding China accountable for dumping 50% price cheap steel on the market in their market. And that's what we have seen has been going on. And one of the reasons why the president is so adamant about these tariffs is the Chinese and how they dump, a steel that's half the price of everybody else on the market in other countries where we don't have any control. Like I said, it's put us in a much stronger negotiating position. Take NAFTA, for instance. Mexico is obviously part of that. And if they're taking action against the Chinese, because now they have a stronger spine because America is standing up, that's a good thing. And again, if it's done correctly, and the president's already mentioned that they're negotiating with China or not China, but Canada and Mexico as part of NAFTA. to alleviate the impacts that the tariffs will have on them and their trade with us and us on and their trade with them, and with our allies that have strategic assets like the Brits. They make certain parts and those kind of things. We don't want to end up taxing our own supply chain from a strategic perspective either. But it's got both our allies and our competitors. It's got their attention. And again, I think it's more about negotiating position and positioning the United States in the world as not a country that's just going to roll over and let itself be trampled on anymore. We're going to stand up and we're going to do what's right for the American people before we do what's right for anybody else. And that's MAGA. That's all it is.
Okay. And I don't think anybody can disagree that we want to do what's right for the American people. Um, Obviously, Europe is not happy about this. How important is Europe? I mean, you actually served over there. So how important is Europe in terms of the trust relationship? You know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that Europe is not really happy with this president.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist also to see that more countries are putting the percent of GDP up for NATO resources that they're supposed to. More countries are climbing. I think we need to put more pressure on Germany. I'd like to see Rich Gurnell confirmed by the Senate. He's been on hold for months now. He's the nominated ambassador to Germany. He's an exceptional foreign policy and national security and international security expert. I've seen his work and I watched him operate for years, and we are hurting ourselves by not doing that. I hope the Republican Congress will get that Republican president's nominee confirmed as soon as possible because we need him. Germany still needs more pressure put on it from a NATO resourcing perspective, and from a migration perspective and what its impact is having on the rest of Europe and those kind of things.
Okay, so I just put up a tweet from Piers Morgan. Best U.S. jobs number since 1983. That's astounding.
Mm-hmm.
Yet still, Trump haters are desperately trying not to give him any credit. Love him or loathe him, real Donald Trump is delivering on jobs. To pretend otherwise is not just partisan politics, it's pathetic. Let me tell you how my feeling is on that. I think that that anybody who doesn't want to give Donald Trump credit for jobs is drinking Kool-Aid that is poisonous. The problem is that there's a flip side, and that is that Donald Trump refuses to give the prior administration credit. And, you know, I have always felt that when the current president, from the very beginning, refused to give the former president any credit, that poisoned the other Kool-Aid well. And so I sure wish that President Obama would get up there and give President Trump credit. But likewise, I sure wish that President Trump, now that he's had a year under his belt and the job market I mean, this is astounding numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why not give the prior administration credit? Because look, the stock market was at 18,000, you know, from 6,000 or 7,000 when Obama took over. Yeah, no question, deregulations, no question, say the tax bill. Those things I think are being viewed by the business community economically as being a plus. But if you refuse to give credit where I think credit is due, the job market went down from close to 10% to 4.8, 4.7%. So why not do this? I mean, if you're going to bring the country together, isn't that the way to do it?
Well, I think the first thing that you would hear from someone in the administration is that look, We got our tax reform plan passed. The companies that have given those bonuses in the billions now to their employees that are creating the new jobs, that are bringing capital home, they weren't doing that under the Obama administration. And that tax plan has been, not one of the other side voted for it. Not one, not even one of the other side voted for it. And the people have seen, in spite of the negative media coverage of that tax reform plan, the people have seen that it is positively impacting their lives, and that's what they expect out of a president, Republican or Democrat. I think that's what you would hear from them. There just wasn't that. Part of this is positive perception on businesses' part that leads to a positive perception on the public's part, and none of that is very concrete. So I think that you can throw the numbers out there on where things were at when President Obama left, but it's a very hard sell for the folks that voted for Trump, that are watching him having to fight through 97% negative media coverage at the national level, which that penetrates down to the local level too. We all know that. That are having to see him fight through the crazy Russian collusion investigation. Aside from the fact that the Russians messed with our electoral system with an information and cyber operation, that is, in fact, is what should be being most hardly looked at. The rest of it is just a bunch of fluff. There's been no evidence, continues to be no evidence of that. When you see when Trump supporters and voters that voted for him see all that and see the successes in spite of those things, they would be very disappointed if he actually gave President Obama any credit. And I'm surprised that President Obama hasn't given Trump credit too, because he has accomplished quite a bit for a first year non-politician president, somebody that's never been in politics before from the elected government side, to get these things done. And but it's the probability of President Obama doing that is zero, because he held Bush accountable for all 8 years of his administration. He blamed everything on George W. Bush. So I'm surprised. I'm surprised he's not trying to take more credit for the past, because his mode of operation has been to look back at the past president and give him all the credit or the discredit in the Bush case.
Well, I think Obama, again, I think when he took office, the economy was in free flow fall, and I think that he overall did fairly well. Certainly, it wasn't as positive as it is now. But it wasn't. I mean, the stock market could have gone down to 500. Okay, it could have gone down to 1,000. Mm-hmm. All I'm saying is, I think that look, I'm the one who said that I think Obama should give Trump credit, but I likewise do believe that if Trump wants to bring the country together, he's the one who's president right now, and to just deny credit. I mean, Trump was taking credit before he actually became president. He was taking credit for the stock market. He was taking credit, for the job increases before he took over. That's insane. Just like I think it's insane for Obama to not give Trump credit at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, it's all about perception, and business people and businessmen and women. It didn't surprise me at all that Trump took credit before he actually took office, because the positive outlook started once his election occurred, and that's when we started seeing positive action and trending from big business, especially in the hopes of having that positive outlook on the business world, and I think that continues today.
But the thing is,
now we have concrete evidence. Now we have concrete actions and evidence to back that up.
But unemployment could have dropped to 20%. Instead of going down to 8%. That's the point that I'm trying to make. That I think that number one, the facts, the concrete evidence showed that there was a remarkable improvement, over an 8-year period of time, considering where we were heading, and we can argue as to what caused where we headed. But I think that you've got to give credit, just like I think you have to give George Bush credit, okay, for what the positive that happened under his administration. And I just again, I think Obama should give credit, and I think that Trump should give credit, and without it, then I think that we're just gonna we're not gonna come together at all.
We'll see. We'll see.
Okay, so here is yeah, we, we we will see, and the question is, can we come together? What okay, so what do you think that we can do to come together as a
Well,
country?
I think you saw it. I think you saw it yesterday. We need leaders that are going to think about policies that put the American people first in a consistent way. Mr. Trump is almost alone in that as an elected official at the national level. Now, there are some, but they're very, very few in number. I mean, even take the tariff issue. The Speaker of the House in Mr. Trump's own party has come out aggressively opposed to him. Haven't heard anything from the Senate Majority Leader yet, but those are the kinds of things that will bring people together, and you see it in the picture from yesterday. What's bringing working people towards this president is what his policies are that put them first as opposed to politics. Previous Republican presidents would never have thought to put those steel workers first because they believe in their partisan ideology. You know what? And I'm as big a free market person as you can possibly get. I'm a John Stossel fan, who's a free, a total
Hmm.
free market type of person. I read his stuff, but I also acknowledge the reality of the world. And the reality of the world is that we are getting taken, so to speak, in a lot of these trade deals. And when I say we, I'm talking about the American people that are losing millions and millions of jobs and have for the last 30 years. And it's time to step back up and make sure our country is secure and that our economy is solid and that we put Americans first instead of other things and other peoples. That's what's going to bring this country together. And unfortunately, the elites in both parties look like they're going to stay out in the cold for as long as they possibly can to see if this man and his policies will fail, as opposed to getting in and pitching in and putting their shoulders to the wheel. The Democrats more so than the Republicans, but you see it on the Republican side too. As I mentioned, Speaker Ryan spoke pretty aggressively yesterday opposed to this tariff idea.
And I can't speak for the speaker, but I would assume that what he's saying is that these tariffs are targeted, and they're going to benefit a very small population, meaning the steel workers, but are going to hurt everybody else. Is that partisan, or is that just saying, look, it doesn't make, from a business standpoint, it doesn't make any sense?
Well, obviously, the president wouldn't do it unless he thought it was the right thing for the American worker. And I think folks like Mr. Ryan on that side of the debate are taking a very narrowly focused view of tariffs and are looking back historically on tariffs that weren't successful, but they weren't successful because they were very narrowly focused. What Mr. Trump's doing is he's broadened that out. He's improved his negotiating position. He's reduced the negotiating position of our competitors, and that puts us in the driver's seat. Now, what actually happens is the next step.
Mhm.
What
Gotcha,
actually
gotcha.
happens is when we talk about the details with in NAFTA with Mexico and Canada, and the details with our allies, where we have strategic partnerships with them, and the details with our competitors like China, and see what other countries are doing. It's not just you turn the switch on and this either happens or it doesn't.
Right.
It's a multi-layered and multifaceted approach.
So really, what I think we're saying here is that we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and
Yeah.
see what happens, how Europe, how Asia, how Mexico, how China is going to react, if we're going to ratchet this up to a point of no return, or as you point out, I think really clearly, and that is that by taking this step, basically what you're doing is you're leveraging better your bargaining position better than what you were able to do before. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, we'll have to wait and see. So I just put up another tweet, this one from Kyle Griffin, and he's saying that the attorney for Stormy Daniels said on CNN, I guess an hour ago, we're going to be able to obtain discovery and documents and testimony that is going to show I'm highly confident that at all times Mr. Trump knew exactly what was going on. So here is I guess the question. Let me just make a preface by saying that you're like me, and that is that there are a lot of things that, and you've said it on our show, that you really don't like Mr. Trump personally.
Hmm.
So this is obviously an area, and I really don't like him personally at all. Okay, his positions, I'm willing to to argue his positions. Personally, it's hard for me to argue his positions. Is this an area that you feel that he's really messing up on, or do you anyway your position, please?
Well, I haven't seen anything on this where his where the allegations have been either from a position of his elected position, where he's tried to misuse his power from an elected official perspective, or it's where he's tried to enact some policy that would target Ms. Daniels. Or those kind of things. I mean, he's basically letting his attorneys handle issues. So in that regard, I'm good with it. The now, look, I'm like anybody else. Uh, Whatever the truth is here, it's eventually going to come out because people dig, and eventually it comes out, and then the voters will decide. That's what happened with David Vitter here in our state. And that's what's going to happen with Mr. Trump too. Now, from a policy perspective, I really can't argue a whole lot with most of the policy issues. Barring the gun rights issue, which I really wasn't really mad about. I'm just very concerned because Trump's not an ideologue and he's not a constitutionalist, and we've got to make sure that his policies stay within the realm of the Constitution. And that's very difficult to get turned back around if you go down that road.
Sure. No,
So
look,
this particular issue, I think he's doing the right thing. He's letting his attorneys handle it, and they should, and keep it as far away from his elected official position and his power as he possibly can, which is very different than what Bill Clinton did. A lot of people, I've seen a lot of people talking to evangelical Christian leaders and those kind of things, and asking why are you being so hypocritical, and they don't see it that way. They see it as that, hey, we've got this guy and we supported him, and he's enacting policies that we agree with, and this was not part of it's not been part of his administration. It's something that's happened outside of that. And so far, he's doing the right things with it, which is completely let his attorneys handle it and stay away from it, quite honestly.
well, but if Obama, had a relationship with a porn star and it was revealed during his presidency, I mean, I would imagine that the religious right would be outraged by it.
Well, the media would have never reported on that.
Well,
Who knows? Who knows whether he would who knows whether he had that kind of relationship with anybody or not. The media, the mainstream media, the corporate media would never report it on it like they're reporting on Stormy Daniels. I mean, last night, a liberal radio station was talking about Stormy Daniels at the time that everybody else was talking about the North Koreans wanting to come to the table and end their nuclear weapons program. From what we were hearing, I mean that tells me that Mr. Trump is living rent free in the liberal mind, and that they're going down a road to abject failure if they continue to do this from a media perspective, because their audiences are going to walk away from them, and they are.
Well, and certain audiences are going to walk away, but you bring up the issue of the national, or at least the governmental tie. My feeling is this: that number one, it's a political governmental. He told us that this didn't, none of these things happened before he got elected, and obviously there's some evidence that wait a minute, there were things that were happening, and that while he was telling us that it didn't happen, while he was running for president weeks before, he was actually involved in covering it up by paying not just this lady but other ladies. So then it gets to the issue of credibility. If his position as president right now is that it didn't happen, that she's lying, that none of these things happened, but logic tells you, wait a minute, why would his attorney pay $130,000 to this lady? And what if he did break the law? What if he broke the campaign finance law? So, I don't think that you can just say is, they're looking at salacious. They're looking at the same issues that I think that would be looked at if it were Bill Clinton. Which, look, I think Bill Clinton was
broke the law. Yeah, sure.
Was a dog. I mean, and he should have been convicted for what happened. Okay, and I think these are issues that should be looked at. But go ahead.
Well, sure. If he's broken the law, that's one thing. But so far, all you're seeing is the salacious information and the media covering it from that perspective. And quite honestly, what I honestly think is they're trying to make something happen, just like they tried with the Russia collusion fiasco that's turned into nothing burger. And always has been. Now we'll see what happens. Now that things are starting to move on this front, we'll see what happens and see what the facts are that do come out. And if he broke the law, then I'm with everybody else. Bill Clinton's problem for me was twofold. One, that he used the power of his office to directly have a inappropriate relationship with a direct subordinate, and that's not the case here. And two, that he lied to an attorney. He lied in a deposition under oath or in testimony under oath, which obviously is perjury and a violation of the law. None of those types of things have occurred that I'm aware of in this discussion yet. But if it comes out that the facts show differently, then I think you'll see a different response.
Okay, that's fair enough. We'll have to go in more detail about that issue. That's an area that I think that you and I have some disagreement. I do see some area, but I will not say that there's any proof right now. There's evidence of collusion, but no proof. Okay, evidence meaning there are issues out there, there are facts out there that might suggest it, but absolutely no proof. Big difference.
Well, I'm not an attorney. I wouldn't characterize them as evidence. I would just say that there was some smoke out there, but nobody's ever found any fire.
Okay, we'll talk about that next time. Is there any other issue that we should talk about that we haven't talked about at this point?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we talked about the Second Amendment from a state level, which really is a state and national level, in our last session on Facebook. And I would just say that folks need to be responding to and talking to their legislators at the federal level too, and make sure that you're watching out for your civil rights. The Second Amendment is a civil right, just like the First Amendment has 5 civil rights in it, and we need to make sure that we are safeguarding those from politics.
Okay, so here, let me put this tweet up. Okay, and it's about the gun. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, I'm sorry, a student. on gun control debate. I do think that being moderate and finding a middle ground is the only way to achieve change. I totally agree with that. Totally agree. On just about on all issues, whether it's gun control or Russia collusion or legislative budget, that when you have two sides that strongly believe in certain positions, that you get nowhere, by supporting either one of those two sides. That you should always try to find some kind of middle ground. So he's talking about gun control, and he's a student, and he's saying, look, I'm a moderate on this issue. Now, your feeling about, I mean, we don't know exactly what he had to say, but is it fair to say that you don't think there should be any moderation on gun control?
Well, it depends on where the line of moderation is. For those, for folks like me, look, I'm Joe Average. I know that the media likes to paint me as right wing, but I just believe in the Constitution of the United States. I believe in our system, the way it's supposed to work as a republic, and I believe that the moderate position is pretty much where we're at today. We have already taken wholesale classes of firearms and made them very difficult to get with deep background checks. We have already regulated the ability to carry a concealed weapon to the point where it's almost impossible in some states to get. And whether the Heller decision from the Supreme Court was supposed to remedy that, we still have places like the District of Columbia who say you can get one, but have laws that are so convoluted and restrictive that it's almost impossible to get. The state of California is the same. So from my perspective, we are already moderated in that regard. And the solutions that the gun control mob wants to have, they just don't work. Look, when I was a commander of the sixth largest Air Force base in the world out in New Mexico, I had a public elementary school, K through 6. I was responsible for its security and responsible for its facilities, and my kids went there and those kind of things. And in those days, back in 2010, 2011, people weren't even talking about doing active shooter drills with the teachers and administrators to see how it would go. We did it. And we know that what it takes to stop a shooter, even with a revolver. We did our first drill with one man with a revolver that went in the front door, and he was able to simulated kill 7 people. That means he was able to reload his revolver before law enforcement could get there, and law enforcement was less than a minute away. Okay, in that situation. We also had to tackle a live active shooter situation that started off of our installation at a Sandia Labs building and came towards our installation. So I have experience in the policies around this issue, and the gun control policies that are being proposed, like banning these so-called weapons that are being talked about as assault rifles, which they're really not. They're just military-looking semi-automatic rifles. That's not going to work. Not allowing people to carry their firearms on school property doesn't work. Or on any gun-free zone, it doesn't work. The shooting we had out in Lafayette at the movie theater is another classic example. It doesn't work. Those types of situations don't work. What does work is hardening these targets. And there are ways to harden a school target, as we have talked about before, through doors, automatic locks, bulletproof glass, having security on site, having single point entry and exit areas, or single point entry areas, so entry can be controlled a lot more than it is today. Look, I could, before I started homeschooling, I couldn't go into my son's school without signing in and having a sticker on my chest before I could walk down the hall just to go get my own son out of his classroom, or even to talk to him. So there are things we can do, but the gun control crowd is not proposing and supporting the things that will actually work. Let's focus on the things that will work.
Okay, I have another question, but I will wait till next Friday. Deals with gun control, and so I'll just wait for that. I know that taking your time and listen, thank you, really, thank you so much. I really love talking with you to get various sides. The one thing I really enjoy in talking to you is being able. I know that you're is well thought of, well thought through, and even if we disagree on certain issues, it's done, I think, in a really respectful way, and that I think goes a long way. I think in trying to find solutions to problems. So I really do appreciate your taking your time, even when we disagree on some issues, to be able to express yourself. And thank you a lot.
Well, thank you, Steve. I enjoy the show and look forward to next week.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go hit some buttons right now. And those people who are watching, please share. Share will be on next week. We'll try to tell what time, see how this one goes. So thank you so much. Let me go ahead and